Welcome, hallowed, humbled, holy human beings, born of the earth, part and parcel with the seasons and cycles of the earth. Did you know that astrology is simply the study of cycles? And the observable correlation and movement of the planets is a mere coincidence. Folks, we're getting to the end of 2020. This will be the last of 3 videos before the end of this year, 3 more moons. And this particular phase of collective human development I've personally termed for years a global restructuring and reprioritization. 2020, going way back before coronavirus, before this year. And us astrologers did our best to prepare the world without frightening people. Nobody knew exactly what would happen, however. Where we stand now, on the other hand, we know. It's been clear as day and staring us in the face. As I mentioned in the last video, it is as if we're tapping down to the bottom of the barrel. We are in this point now of tapping down, and what we can say is there is a collective upswing. Now, this is obviously a generalization. This is the collective movement. All of us little jiva souls, we may be going up and down in our own individual rhythm. Okay, so this is it. We are now in the wrap-up of this particular phase, 2020, Journey to the Underworld. We are wrapping up this particular chapter of global collective restructuring. And this restructuring, by the way, is not simply economic upheaval. It's not simply a global national restructuring. This is a total restructuring in consciousness. We have all been going through this deep inner restructuring and reprioritization. What really matters? Why are we really here? We'll continue to ask these types of questions as we will discuss. Now, Jupiter will be completing his year-long transit of Capricorn towards the end of this year. Saturn will be completing his 2.5-year-long transit of his own sign of Capricorn at the end of this year. So winter solstice 2020, Jupiter-Saturn in a new phase conjunction, 0 degrees Aquarius, very powerful, distinct signature that is a symbol of the breaking into a new phase, new beginnings, new possibilities. This will also be coinciding with our forthcoming eclipses. So here we go. We are entering eclipses. With our coming full moon, this will technically be a partial penumbral lunar eclipse. So here's the good news, Soul Fam. The season and energy is about to change. There is a shift on the horizon. We're flipping things around again. Only this time we're not plundering the underworld for the treasure of humanity's secret horrors and buried hellscapes. We're not simply exposing the darkness of corruption and how bad things actually are beneath the surface. This was 2020. A huge relief for some of us, I might add. We're not simply exposing this darkness. There are fundamentally new, fresh directions, open, uncharted lands, new worlds, new dimensions, new possibilities on the horizon. And by the way, the hellscapes of 2020, this is transformation. This is mastery. This is Saturn and Pluto. These are the hardest planets. These are the hardest phases and seasons of life. And it is where we achieve mastery. It's where we go beyond our limitations. And have we not all been pushed beyond our limitations in order to discover newfound strength, authority, confidence, stability in ourselves, and again, also to go through this reprioritization, what really matters? Us being an authority in ourselves means that we determine what really matters. We determine our orientation to life. And by taking control of our orientation to life, the entire fabric of existence, life itself, changes. Now, Mars has just recently stationed direct these last weeks. This can bring a tremendous ambition, direction, new energy, this desire. We've got to get to the fresh. We've got to open up new directions. We've got to get into new agendas, new lifestyles. So it's like the train is just now pulling out of the station. Okay, things are building momentum, things are going to continue to move forward through the end of the year. And it may also be taking some time to build up that momentum, to get things lined up. Things are coming together now, things are lining up, especially physically. Outwardly is Mars, our outward experience is Mars. So this is, again, our future direction, schedule, orientation can be coming together, lining up after many months of redirecting and upheaval while Mars was retrograde since September. So to zoom into the details of the present and the short term, before we get into these eclipses. This weekend, yesterday, the Sun entered the sign of Sagittarius and Venus entered the sign of Scorpio. Sun in Sagittarius is a doorway opening. Sagittarius season will take us now through mid-December, initiating new adventures, discoveries, and expansion of the understanding of life. We'll talk about this philosophical period coming up. Sagittarius deals with truth. We'll be entering into an incredibly existential set of eclipses, pondering the very meaning of life, as well as what is true and what is not real, introducing new perspectives and challenging old perspectives that can provoke a very questioning of the meaning of our existence, as well as our overall long-term orientation with life, our long-term goals. It's like Sun in Sagittarius is the surveyor. We're going to be surveying, we're going to be looking at the big picture perspective and then determining, prioritizing, evaluating what is true to us. Now, Venus is now separating from a square to Saturn, a bit of an adjustment, an evaluation, social pressure and interaction this last week in terms of getting our money together, our person-to-person interactions together, stable and in order. And now Venus has entered Scorpio yesterday, where she will remain through December 15th. So Venus in Scorpio, through this period, goes into the very underbelly of our relationships and our interactions. And not only in terms of intimate relationships, but also in terms of our relationship to ourselves. We're going to be forming more intimate, closer, bonding connections with self and other. But Venus is how we relate inwardly. So Venus in Scorpio relates with a penetrative depth, like a submarine or a bat sending out a signal through the subterranean complex, a little ping, a little reverberation in order to pick up on what forms, what shapes are there, buried in the darkness. Venus in Scorpio monitors the depths, the mystery, picks up on subtle energies by tuning into the magnetism of our own or another's soul. Now, we've talked about this for quite a bit. I put a huge Pluto video, over an hour long. You can go to my YouTube channel and check that out. That is like the Pluto material for this year, I have to say. It's one of the best videos I've seen this year. So there is, again, this exploration of this deep unconscious magnetism, what we're attracted or repulsed by, why we have these redundant experiences is often rooted in our own unconscious field, as well as the unconscious, the hidden intentions of our own soul, which generate much of our own life experience. So Venus in Scorpio, again, can be really exploring this both inwardly as well as deeply, intimately in our relationships. So this magnetism is the push-pull of getting into the depth, the mystery, the complexity of our own hidden depth, as well as the fascinating push and pull, draw in or repulsion with another soul, which is to say, in another entire universe. I mean, when we are exploring relationship, it is like another soul is a mystery, is a black hole, is their own universe. And when we get into Scorpio, there is this magnetism where we find ourselves being absorbed or being drawn into another person's universe for what may be mysterious reasons, but there are reasons at the root. And that's why we explore this magnetism. It's like we are a soul detective getting deeper, deeper, deeper into why we have these drives, why we have this magnetism. Relationship and intimacy is the primary vehicle for soul evolution and growth. So we're really inquiring, how are we connecting? Connection is going to be an underlying theme through the end of this year, not only in relationships, but in terms of being connected with ourself, with the capital S. We'll talk about Neptune square the moon's nodes. We'll talk about connecting with an ultimate sense of meaning, or that transcendental space in our hearts, the spiritual world, that can tether and anchor us, connect us to something bigger than just ourselves. So we're really exploring connection, again, philosophically in terms of meaning, but also in terms of relationship. Why are we together? What are we doing? How are we opened or closed is going to be another big one. How are we being pulled into another person's field? Why? What is it in this person or people that attracts us? Or if we are repulsed, turned off, closed down, why? What betrayal, loss, or abandonment might be there beneath the surface that's getting triggered and catalyzing this type of magnetic response? How can we heal our hearts, Venus? How can we soften again? By opening to new levels of connection and support. Now, Venus will be forming an opposition to Uranus. This will be exact at the end of the month, I believe the 27th, bringing clear seeing, objectivity, objective reflection from others in terms of these deeper, more complex dynamics. It's like Uranus can be shining a light into the darkness. How are these exchanges going? Being illuminated, including money, property, power dynamics. We're talking about the Taurus-Scorpio polarity. So this is, possessions, money. The polarity between Taurus is also space, sovereignty, open road, self-resourcefulness, closed circuit. The space and time that we need to settle down, to rest, to relax, and process all of life's complexity and interactions. In balance with Venus and Scorpio, that is the desire for merging and intimacy and getting into the complexity and experiencing sexual union and being attracted to other individuals for the purpose of soul growth by creating experiences that are full spectrum emotional experiences. We're not all happy beings all the time. We're not robots. So Venus and Scorpio actually craves this depth, this intimacy, this emotional intensity in many respects. It is thrilling. It is alive. It is the sexual energy that keeps us passionate and moving and growing. So again, there's this dichotomy between the space and the intimacy, what may feel like claustrophobic overwhelm, and how to have that in balance with the time that we need to meditate and practice to ourselves. And again, this can play out in terms of power dynamics, money, property, what is our own, what is theirs. And Venus and Scorpio, opposite to Uranus, can be introducing new ways of creating these relationships, or how we live, or how we deal with material worth, values, money, or property. So we're really exploring what's at work here. We're going to really be investigating and exploring relationship dynamics. What's really driving things? What's beneath the surface? Layer, then this layer, after this layer, after this layer. Particular people can also catalyze sudden realizations through their reflections, their feedback, or there can be shocking events or sudden fluctuations that can bring a sudden recognition of the actual reality of our dealings, the actual financial circumstance, the actual folks that we're dealing with, a reckoning, a eureka moment, a breakthrough, as well as, again, opening a doorway to these new possibilities, because Uranus introduces the future. It's not necessarily about doing these dealings, energy exchange, money, property, relationship in the same way. Rather, there can be new, different, or avant-garde ways of handling money, property, space, our human interactions, to bring in this balance of sovereignty and intimacy. New ways of doing this, including new ways of doing intimacy and connecting with others in more deep and meaningful ways. Now, Neptune is stationing direct, square the moon's nodes at the end of this month of November. This is a really important underlying dynamic that's going to take us through eclipse seasons, through the first half of 2021. I did a very in-depth video on Neptune square the moon's nodes for my Patreon followers. $6 a month, you can get extra videos from me. But I do want to bring up this dynamic because whenever a planet is square to the moon's nodes, it's an important underlying evolutionary intention, collectively. There tends to be simultaneous opportunities to get into the planet square the moon's nodes, as well as developmental issues surrounding the planet square the moon's nodes. So we're really going to be looking at the archetype of Neptune. The intention here is to integrate that sense of connection to something bigger than just ourself. Again, being anchored or tethered in the spiritual world, that magical influence, that mystical connection. This is about trust. This is about surrender. This is about purpose. That sense, again, of being something bigger than just ourselves is where we get the most important core sense of meaning. Neptune rules the collective. How are we dealing with this collective world circumstance? And it's going to be a wild, crazy, chaotic world circumstance through this end of the year at the beginning of 2021. So we'll really be investigating some of these things, such as boundaries. Where do I end and where do you begin? What is true, again, and what is not true. Can be discerning public self versus private self. What we leave to fate, again, surrender, versus when we need to take control, when there is no fate other than what we make it. So these are big themes here. We can be exploring themes of belief system. Our beliefs sort of function like a filtration system. What are we open to? What are we closed to? Well, we're all going to really be looking at this filtration system when it comes to the news and the politics and the global chaos and the big changing of powers internationally as well as close at home. It's like, what are we open to? Do we believe this? Or do we need to discern? Do we need to protect? Do we need healthy boundaries? Do we see from a vantage point where there's no correlation or connection to another vantage point? And then why? Why is there such a divide in our perspectives of life if we're all trying to look at the same thing? These are going to be the questions. It's also going to be a look at sensitivity, how we're connecting to life, nature, surrounding world. So just these bullet points, again, Neptune square the moon's nodes, and you can go more in depth on my Patreon page, can bring up connection issues, the question of spiritual belief. Again, this includes an investigation of how well are our beliefs functioning. Are they healthy or are they harmful? A belief can be healthy or harmful. The necessary polarity to Pisces, the sign opposite to Pisces, is Virgo. Virgo is how well does this function in the world? Could this be improved? The proof is in the pudding. Very pragmatic. We all need that Virgo corner of the mutable cross because the eclipses are going to be Gemini, Sagittarius, moon's nodes, square Neptune and Pisces. So we need this Virgo, discerning, fact-checking, scrutinizing, pragmaticism. How well do our beliefs function in the world? Beliefs can be helpful or harmful, depending on how that filtration system is open or closed to different possibilities in life. If we don't believe in something, we're closed to that possibility. If we do believe in something, we're open to it. And what we're opening ourselves to could be harmful, and what we're closing ourselves to could be harmful. So we have to really fact check. Boundary issues. Fulfillment. Are we feeling fulfilled? Neptune square the moon's nodes can bring themes of addiction, escapism, this feeling of void, right? Pisces isn't just love, light, spiritual world. Pisces, Neptune can be the void, meaninglessness. And when we have an experience of meaninglessness, how do we function? How do we survive? What do we do? It's like we're all on a search for meaning. But while that void or that feeling of lack of meaning or insignificance is there, this can lead to escapisms, suicide, going off the deep end. We're going to be witnessing this type of collective going off the deep end due to the chaos, the lack of discernment, the not knowing what is true or what's not, whose side to take. And this is going to push our humanity into our evolutionary direction, which is, how do we discern life? That's the moon's north node in Gemini. That is our collective evolutionary direction through this next year of 2021. Neptune will deal with victim consciousness as well versus surrender. There is a high octave surrendering, which means we feel filled and charged with life, versus a victim type of surrendering that just gives up and is blown around in the winds of the world like a leaf, here and there, no boundaries, no control, no point, no purpose. We have to be anchored in something meaningful. Neptune can be channeling creativity, art, music, painting, singing. Divine dance is Pisces. Divine dance is everything. That's how we find our anchor. That's how we find our heart. That's how we come back to ultimate reality. We have to tune into the divine dance in some way, shape, or form. The divine dance takes us through all sorts of different worlds and different phases and different experiences, but by tuning into the music, we don't lose ourselves in the temporary seasons or get lost in the rat maze. The divine rhythm keeps us anchored in the flow, that keeps moving, that keeps trusting, that keeps opening to the experiences that we need to continue to learn and grow. We're going to be learning about different people, different developmental stages, different agendas. How do we all get along? How do we all connect, exchange information, our fundamental truth and orientation to the rest of life and nature? Eclipse is 2020. This coming eclipse season will also initiate the year of 2021 with that moon's north node in Gemini. That will be the underlying evolutionary intention through the rest of this year. Eclipses come twice a year when the sun intersects the points where the moon makes a connection with the ecliptic. That's what causes our eclipses. So twice a year we have this shifting of direction because it is actually a period of getting an evolutionary update collectively and finding a new alignment. This is why tons of people get readings during eclipse season, because it's so obvious and tangible and visceral. Everything moves around during eclipse season, and everybody says, oh my gosh, eclipses, astrology is real. So again, the point where the moon touches the ecliptic, the sun connects with every 6 months, and it's always a period of change. These eclipses represent the major beats, the start and end points of particular evolutionary rhythms. So the last major beat was this last summertime, around June. And now December 2020, another great shift, another evolutionary update, taking us into Moon's North Node in Gemini, Neptune, mutable cross. We're coming out of a period where 2020 has been mostly structure, Capricorn, Earth sign, survival. I was telling people for years before 2020, well, pay attention to what happens in 2020 because the astrology is so earthy, we're not going to be able to miss it. It's going to play out right in front of our faces. So that's where we've been and what we've done. And now things are going to move into air. Things do get lighter, but they also get more existential. Again, it's like, who are we? What are we doing? This is mental, philosophical. It's concerning people, interactions, communication, ideas, information exchange, and again, fundamental belief. Belief is that most fundamental, container, why we're meeting, what are we doing, what are we exchanging, what are we gaining. Now, Moon's North Node in Gemini has an evolutionary intention to learn how to assimilate new data by including various perspectives and opinions. The word is multi-opinionated. We live in a multi-opinionated world. I don't know if you've noticed that yet. So how do we function in this world? How do we deal with all these different opinions? And how do we use this reality? This is nature. Diversity is nature. Different opinions is nature. How can we use this? How can we learn and grow from this? Well, the function of Gemini is to break apart our surrounding world into bits and pieces of information so to make sense of our reality. Gemini rules all language, as well as the mind. Mind is divine tool, not a problem. It's a tool to make sense of our world, to communicate, to have human experience. So, mind and language function the same. We chunk something. There's a stick. There's a tree trunk. And then by chunking, partitioning, having these bits and pieces of information, now we can communicate. Now I can say the stick's over there, the tree trunk's over there, and we can communicate complex, conceptual ideas. So, we're collectively being asked, how can we reassemble our world? We're breaking apart all this information. It's like beep, 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 this computer, wow, this factor over here, these beliefs, these ideas, these groups, these movements. And it's like, how do we reassemble this back together in a way that makes sense? Or at least in a way that we can function? Now, the moon's north node in Gemini is also going to be connecting with Jupiter in Aquarius in a trine this next year. This coming year is going to bring a tremendous expansion to technology, ways and means of communication and connection. The nature of Gemini is that we are all multifaceted, conglomerate, composite people. And similarly, our reality is a composite reality. What I mean by this is life looks differently depending on what vantage point you have at it. So, depending on where you're situated, the truth can change. That's Gemini reality. This is why we hear the stereotype about Gemini being tricky and fickle and never being able to make up its mind or being shady or untruthful. Well, this circumstance changes, the time of day changes, the mood changes, and the whole truth changes is Gemini reality. You look at the same thing from different perspectives, you have different people telling different stories. So, Gemini is going to bring up this he said, she said, right? I mean, it's obvious in the United States where we have this Gemini, Democrats and Republicans. The glyph for Gemini are two polar parallel lines that never intersect. They are completely polar different, like hot, cold, good, evil, on, off. So we've got Democrats and Republicans in the United States who are looking at the same exact life, the same exact phenomenon, and are obviously in completely different realities. We live in a nation that's split in half. Gemini, completely different realities, completely different intentions. What are we going to do about this? Have a civil war? Hopefully not. Hopefully there's better ways to work out this polarity consciousness that is our current world. This is the current evolutionary intention through this next year, 2021. So we have to learn how to listen, we have to learn how to discern, so that way we can really get to the same page and speak the same language. Right now, it's just being introduced. When the evolutionary intentions are being introduced, which I'm saying is through this eclipse season, this tends to be when we're challenged. So are we all speaking the same language December 2020? No, it's like the Tower of frickin' Babel. It's a reality meltdown here in the United States. It's an existential crisis. I'm laughing, but at the same time, it can be potentially terrifying. The conspiracy theories, the fantasy. I did a video on conspiracy theories going back over 6 months ago, when Neptune first began to form a square to the moon's nodes. You can go onto my channel, check out, just Google Tim Halloran conspiracy theories. That video is going to remain completely on point through the end of this year into the first half of 2021. Moon's north node in Gemini is bringing us all into the reality of where there's options. Okay? There's a fragmentation. There's all these different dimensions, all these different possibilities. How do we function in this? By the way, that conspiracy theory video, Neptune square the moon's nodes, this is not my opinion. This is objective astrology. We can use the astrology objectively to understand the types of experiences that we're having on this planet, that we're having in life. Now, Neptune square the moon's nodes through the end of this year. One of the optional dimensions that we will all be given the option to choose is the dimension called delusion. Again, people can go off the deep end. This is a part of the power, the gift of free will. So there needs to be, there needs to be the evaluation of what's real and what's not real. How, what works for, is there a bottom line we can all agree on? So is there a reality that we can all agree on while we're exploring this world of multiplicity, duplicity? There's more than one person, there's different groups, there's multiple places, multiple ideas, multiple agendas. And what we're all going to be learning, part of this Gemini intention, is how to honor our own multi-conglomerate, multifaceted nature. So it's like we've all got different ideas, we've all got different interests, and we can also shapeshift. We can put on different masks or different hats for different people in different places, so to satiate all the different parts of ourself. This is a kind of paradoxical way of being whole, because Gemini is kind of bipolar, jumping from one thing to the next, either on or off, binary nexus. But this type of jumping is also human consciousness, mind, nature. We all have different interests. We don't have to just go to school for one thing. Gemini is the eternal student. Speaking of which, I have been so passionate, honored, enthused to be teaching really deep astrology through my Patreon community. $24 a month, you get to join my Astro School. This next week, through the end of November, I have 4 or 5 videos coming out to the Astro School. We're getting into the planets, the archetypes, and then we're going to get into deep evolutionary astrology. Honestly, you can't find this stuff amongst so many astrologers out there. So if you're interested in the flavor of these reports that goes really deep, that goes into what's beneath the surface, folks, you can learn to do all this stuff yourself. Astrology, I have learned, it's one of the greatest gifts. I have been very blessed by the opportunity lately to run some experiments. What happens if we take astrology away? What happens if we use astrology in our life, in our human interactions? And what I've learned from this experiment is that astrology brings the gift of compassion. Understanding the diversity of life, understanding the diversity of other human beings. So astrology is an essential, indispensable tool, gift, and wisdom. Not a man-made tool, one coming directly from nature. And we can use the astrology to get to a level of depth and understanding that would otherwise not be capable to get to that same level of depth or understanding. So that's going to continue to be available to y'all. And for the rest of us, we'll continue to go through this amazing journey, question, what is life? Please remember to take care of yourself. I'm wishing you all the best. Until next time.